Hey guys, it's me Robin, RsIslandCrafts. Welcome to Scraps, Everyone's Got Them. Today I'm going to show you one of the things you can do with some of your scraps. This is adding machine tape. It's 3.5 inches wide and yards and yards and yards long. I bought a bundle of these, I believe, on Amazon several years ago, and I think it came in a pack of 4 or 5. It was really inexpensive. I believe it was less than $10. What I'm going to show you how to do is how to sew all your little bits of scraps onto this tape, the adding machine tape, so that you can use it in a scrap quilt. Some quilts have you using like a coin quilt. You'll use stacks and stacks of fabrics that have you sewn together, or some quilts will have a piano key border. Some quilts have an X in it, a bunch of fabric sewn together like this. When you just naturally take fabrics and sew them together one after another, sometimes the fabrics can tend to get a little out of shape. This is a way of doing paper piecing. It keeps it all on the register, on the adding machine tape, and it just keeps it all in one spot for you. By sewing onto the adding machine tape, we can use up any types of scraps, wonky. You can use any different types that you want. If you want to put flannels on here or you want to put denim, it's up to you. I'm just using all quilting cotton for mine. Okay, here we go. Now to get yourself set up, as you can see, I sew on mine, and I just keep, every time I have a little session of sewing on scraps, I just keep rolling it up. So I keep this section over to the left of my machine. You take this roll and you can put it off to the side of your machine. You can just sit it there, but it tends to roll, and if you do it this way, it tends to get twisted. So if you have a little basket or an old container to put it in, you can just set it in there. On the side of my machine, I have a spot where I have some tubs stacked up against a cabinet, and it just sits in there nicely. So I just take out a bunch of the tape. As you can see, I have cut this off of my roll. So if your tape happens to rip and it comes unhooked from your big roll, don't worry about it. It's okay. It's still usable. Because in the end, you can take, even if you cut this into, say, 6-inch strips, you can take them and sew them together when you're ready to put them in a quilt. And after it gets handled a little bit, sometimes your adding machine tape will pop off. That's still, don't worry about that. I like to leave my tape on because when you're sewing with scraps like this, you can have any type of bias strips anywhere. So this keeps them from getting stretched out of shape. You'll have to excuse my squeaky chair. Now you want to keep a pair of scissors close by because I have a little scissors on my machine, but I like to clip my thread anyways. That way I'm wasting a little bit less. And what you can do, today I just have white thread in my machine, but if you have like leftover thread that you've bought a while ago that you no longer use, you can use that on here. Or leftover bobbins. This is a great way to use up all those little leftover bobbins that only have enough to sew a couple strips. You're going to spend a lot. This is a fiddly type of scrap project, so if you end up swapping out your bobbins a lot, it's okay. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but you're not going to be wasting that thread and throwing it away. Over to my side, I have my bucket of scraps. I went through our scrap bins that we were ironing and cutting up previously. I have the 1.5, 2, and 2.5 inch strips in here. I don't care to use the ones, the 3.5 or the larger ones, because it takes up too much space on your strip here, and you're not going to get as much variety, and it just stands out a little. I try not to go any more than 2.5 inches. And also on this side, I have some that I haven't trimmed up yet, and they're just a little bit wonky, and that's okay too. You can decide with this project whether you want to have everything nice and even and you want to only use 2-inch strips on here so it's all perfect for like a piano key border, or if you want to just go crazy like I have and just put in any size, any width that you choose. As long as it's wider than your tape, then you can use it. Now you can also have several of these going at a time. You don't, like I said, you don't have to keep them all hooked to the roll like this. Let's say you want to have a pink and purple quilt. You can only use your pink and purple scraps on one. Roll off a couple yards of it, then take out another roll, and you can have that one only be black and white accent prints, and that'll be fine too. You can have a wonky one, and then you can have one that where every strip is the same size. I like to go scrappy and I like to go wonky, so for me, I'm just going to sew them all to the strip. The reason I have the second one is I'd started this a few years ago and I lost it. And then I refound it after, of course, I had already started this. Later on in the series, we'll go ahead and we'll make some blocks out of this also, so you can see the things you can do with it. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to be sewing these right sides together. You see how this one still has a selvage? So I just make sure that the selvage is over the top of the paper and it won't be part of the block. Now with my presser foot, I am just using the one that came with my machine. I'm not worrying about a 1/4 inch seam because every seam, with all the different sizes scraps you're using, it won't matter if the seam allowances are different. And if you're using a same size strip like 2.5 inches, then as you're sewing, every seam allowance will be the same anyways because you'll always be using the side of your presser foot. Make sure you have a little bit of paper in here so you're not struggling and pulling on it. And off we go. You can go as fast or as slow as you want. That's it. As simple as can be. I pull out just enough thread, snip it, and instead of pulling this out, I just like to slide it underneath here so that we're all set up for the next time. And then we just finger press. Now we're going to leave this until we're all done, and then we'll go back later and I'll show you how to trim it up. So you just grab another one, lay it down, hold it up, and off we go. Give it a little trim. Finger press. Okay, for this next one, we can either sew this on straight like this, or we can choose to sew this a little wonky. We're just going to line it up with the edge of the fabric on top, and sew. Now in this piece, you don't want to, it's not going to matter that much if you have that little extra bulk, but to avoid having that extra bulk, or to avoid those polka dots from showing through, just bend the paper back, be careful you don't cut it, and just follow along that one fabric and trim it. Fold it back over and pick your next piece. And sew. Easier if you use your wider fabric here. Because that way, when you come back over, you'll have more fabric here and you won't have any of the thin slices like that, unless that's what you want. Bring the paper back. Don't worry if you trim a little bit into the seam allowance. As long as you leave yourself at least 1/8 of an inch, you'll be fine. Finger press it. Now another way you're going to get wonky is if you use pieces that are already a little wonky. I try to avoid going too crazy on the wonky. I personally don't want to have too many triangles like that, but this is your strip. You can do it any way you want. So I'm going to go ahead and keep on stitching, and then when I get a decent amount on here, I'll go over to the cutting table and I'll show you how we take care of trimming this up. Alright, our next step is going to be go ahead and iron this so it looks kind of nice and neat. What I do is I take with this extra roll that I've already been sewing on all this time. This is one of those handles that come in a gift bag. When the gift bag, we use them as much as we can and for other things, and when it gets all torn and ripped up, I just save the handles. So to hold this part from rolling all over the place, just give it a little knot. You tie your shoes, and this keeps it, if it rolls off the table, you're not going to be chasing it all the way across the room. And on the other end, I put my big roll into this basket for, once again, to keep that from rolling everywhere. Now ironing this, it's just going to be simple. We're just going to press it just to make these, if we finger press and there's a little bit of extra fabric right here, then we're just going to flatten it out so the seams are all nice and flat. Nothing fancy. I do have steam on, but I'm not pressing the steam button because it really doesn't need it. Just a quick little iron, just to even it all out. Now, just like with any other paper piecing, it is okay to have the steam on, and even if you chose to go ahead and hit the steam, it's not going to hurt anything because it's just paper. It's like printer paper. It's not going to dissolve on you. Just keep pressing it all down. On your last one, you want to give it a nice little push over to the side and press it just so it lays flat for your next one. All the other pieces are sewn on both seams, so it's not like they're going to go anywhere. And it's as simple as that. If you can't find adding machine tape, you can make your own. You can take as simple as using the copy paper. This is a little bit thinner than what you would use through your printer, but you can slice that up into whatever width you want. Say like this is a 3.5 inch. If you wanted it larger or smaller, if you wanted it smaller, you could just cut this in half after you've made it, and you would have two sections. They would just be identical. But if say you wanted it to be 6 inches wide, you can just cut your printer paper that way. You can also get rolls of the art paper that the kids use to put on their easels to draw, and then cut out the size you want from that. I'm not sure how sturdy the rolls are and whether or not you'd be able to cut through it with, say, a hacksaw or something like that, but you could at least roll out the paper and slice it that way. Now we're going to go ahead and trim it. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to trim all this excess so that it matches the same all the way along. Now I've gone ahead and I've just let the roll go off onto the floor that way, and on this side I have the empty roll of paper still sitting in my basket, just sitting on the floor. Now all trimming is going to be done from the back side so you can see the paper, just like if you were doing string blocks and you were trimming them up to size and you do them from the back. It's the same theory if you've made those before. I'm going to use my 9.5-inch square ruler and my rotary cutter. But if you didn't have these, you could just trim right along the edge with your scissors. It would be perfectly fine. I decided to swap mine around, and I have down here, I have the part that's already been stitched previously. And off that end of the table, I have the blank paper. This seems like it might be a little bit easier this way. So all you do is you line your ruler up along the side of the tape. I like to go just a little bit past because I don't want to be cutting the paper. And you just trim. And then you roll it down. Line it up. Did anyone catch that I didn't close my rotary cutter for safety? I have a bad habit. And you're just going to keep going all along until you have it all trimmed. Now if you were to trim the paper, it wouldn't be a crisis. It just dulls your blade a little, and then your paper won't be exactly that same length. But it's probably about 1/8 of an inch if you trim it, so. And there you go, you got another section added to your scrappy coin string strip, whatever. I like to do this, I call this my rainy day, I don't want to think today project. It's a day you want to sew, but you really don't want to think and worry about measurements and exact and cutting blocks. You can just take 15 minutes each day and just throw some of these strips down in here and make yourself, in 15 minutes you could probably get close to a yard done, if not more. So in the short amount of time we were sewing together, we've got almost a yard done anyway. So 15 minutes would be plenty of time to pick out your scraps and get sewing and trim. Now you have all these little bits left over. If we were using larger scraps, you might have had bigger chunks left over on the end that you can choose to either re-sew onto this if they're long enough, or to use for another scrap project. These are all really small, and I have zero use for these. I don't save these, I toss them. Some people like to save them. They put them in, they'll throw them into a pillowcase and make a bed for an animal, or they'll use them to stuff into pin cushions. But I don't do those things. This is truly scraps and waste for me. I'm okay. I will throw those away and not worry about them. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment down below and I'll be happy to answer them. And if I need to, I will make another video for you. Thanks for sewing with me. Bye.